Alright everyone, so today I wanted to share with you the details and also highlight the #1 epic champion that is going to be 6-starred across the board. And this is going to include casual players, more advanced players, whales, people who play the game a lot, people who don't play a lot, and there is a reason why that is the case. This champion is going to be at the top of a lot of people's tier lists as well. And while he's not arguably the best champion in the game, he is extremely well-rounded, extremely versatile. You can use this guy in so many different groups, and he just offers so much to the table while also just being a strong defense-based champion overall. And that is, of course, going to be Tayrel. So Tayrel, I wanted to go over what makes him really strong, how to build him, his skills, masteries, all that sort of stuff, as well as show him in action. And let's just go ahead and start off here with his actual skill kit. So he is a defense-based champion. Really important, of course, because he is defense-based. He's going to get more damage from defense. And that's also going to keep him alive longer as well. So he's not going to be really squishy like a lot of attack-based champions. And getting into a skill kit right off the bat, you have his Humble skill. Attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 40% chance of placing a 50% decrease attack debuff for 2 turns. Damage inflicted is proportional to defense. So that is the strong version of the decrease attack debuff. And the important thing about debuffs as well is it says it's only a 40% chance to place the debuff, but it's going to last for 2 turns, and this is on his skill 1, which means it's on his skill that doesn't have a cooldown. So this is just his auto attack. He's always going to have a chance to place this, and in a lot of cases you're going to have way more speed than the enemies that you're facing. So you're going to take turns way more relative to the amount of turns that your enemies take. So, it's not as big of a deal for debuffs to not last as long as, for example, buffs. Buffs, the amount of turns that they last is much more important because you're taking turns really quickly based off of the amount of speed that you have. So something to be mindful of when it comes to, how to think of debuffs versus buffs. Second ability here, Singing Steel attacks all enemies, so this is his AoE, has a 75% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. So he's got the strong version of the decreased attack on his skill 1, now he's got the strong version of the decreased defense debuff on his AoE skill 2, also for 2 turns. If the target is under a decreased attack debuff, which he has on his skill 1 right here, so probably going to be the case a lot of the time, it will place a sleep debuff for 1 turn. Damage inflicted is proportional to defense. So not only does he have that decreased attack, decreased defense, but now he's got some additional debuff utility with that sleep added into this as well. And this is an AoE, so something to be mindful of for dungeons and content where you're going to be facing multiple enemies. So you can get some decent damage out of that ability as well. And then you've got his third ability, attacks 1 enemy, decreases the target's turn meter by 50%. If the attack fully depletes the turn meter, it will place a stun debuff for 2 turns. Damage inflicted is proportional to defense. So this ability right here is just some added utility, added debuffs. So, you can just see that this champion's skill kit, not only is he incredibly defensive, tanky, his abilities are based off of defense, so he's going to get damage from that. So he can actually put out a very solid amount of damage. He's got that debuff. Some of the most crucial debuffs in the game, decrease attack and decrease defense, and he's also got sleep and stun, and on top of that, his aura here increases ally defense in all battles by 25%. Very solid, useful aura that you can use in all aspects of the game as well. So just an extremely well built champion. It's no wonder why this guy is going to be at the top of many people's tier lists. So now let's get into actual gear and how you want to build this champion based off of his actual skills here. And of course, really importantly, is going to be accuracy. I want to mention that right now because this guy just has so many debuffs on him. He's got that decreased attack, he's got that decreased defense, he's got that sleep, he's got the turn meter reduction, and he's got the stun. So I have looked at my accuracy here at 182, and what I'll say about this number, it's actually kind of important because I've been doing some dungeons with this guy. I haven't noticed any problem with 182 accuracy. I've got some additional masteries that help a little bit, but for the clan boss, if you're doing Ultra Nightmare and Nightmare, I believe 182 accuracy is going to be a bit shy of what you're looking for Nightmare, and it's going to be very, very short for Ultra Nightmare. So, what I would do in that case is if I did decide to use this guy for my clan boss team, which I don't right now, I'd probably swap out that defensive set of gear that he has for like an accuracy set of gear. Just 30, 40, 50 extra points of accuracy, which is what you're going to get from that accuracy gear set, is going to be enough to kind of push him to that point where he should be fine in Nightmare and even Ultra Nightmare. But the gear that I'm using here, I think this guy is a great candidate for a lifesteal set. Defense type champions are really nice for lifesteal because they have a lower HP pool, but they're really tanky, so they don't take a lot of actual relative damage to the number of HP that they have, but they're still going to be putting out a lot of damage because their skills are based off of defense. So in terms of thinking about the percentage of their life pool that you can heal from lifesteal, it's going to be really high. So very good candidate for that. You don't have to use lifesteal if you have other champions on your team that can provide other sources of healing. That's totally okay, but obviously, accuracy is an important stat. I also did decide to virtually crit cap this champion as well, and get him with a decent chunk of crit damage for the extra DPS. And then, of course, defense. Defense is obviously kind of like his main stat that all of his abilities scale off of. Survivability, additional damage, and then everything else here. If you shouldn't really need too much additional survivability. So you don't really need to worry about HP, maybe a little bit of attack, but you don't really need to worry much about that. That's just going to be extra stats, and speed is always going to be, really, really important. But I will say when it comes to speed, probably not as important on this guy as a lot of other champions. It's still obviously important. It's pretty much important on everybody. But the reason why I say that is because, again, going back to that idea of debuffs, right? Debuffs are not quite as important as buffs in terms of how many turns they last, because your enemies are going to be taking way less turns compared to the number of turns that you're taking. So even if he's got, anywhere in a decent speed point, you shouldn't really have to worry too much about his debuffs really falling off that much, especially this decreased attack, because it is on his auto here. So that's kind of what's going on there. Let's take a look. So he is using the crit chance gauntlets instead of the crit damage ones. So, gives you kind of a little understanding. This gear it's good. It's definitely, good gear, but it's not, I didn't pull any gear off of my other champions to use on this champion here. Let's see here. He's only using a 4-star ring. This is the best. Was that really the best defense ring I could find? I don't believe that. I think I forgot to equip it. Let's put this on here. That changes things a little bit of extra defense. Now we're pushing, what is that, 3,800. Once you get past 4,000 defense, the diminishing returns, 3,800 to 4,000 is a perfectly good defense to have on this guy. Of course, crit damage as the amulet, that's going to be, really important, especially if you can get your crit rate to around 100%. Even if it's close, you want to go with a crit damage amulet. And, of course, we're using an accuracy banner, and we're still, we're right at that point where I wouldn't even mind having an extra 20 to 40 accuracy on this guy for clan boss if I did decide to take him there. All right, now let's get into the actual masteries. Masteries are very straightforward for Tayrel. You've got the typical crit rates and crit damage, which you pretty much always want to get. Extra damage when he's with full HP, which he's pretty much always going to have, especially if you've got a lifesteal gear on. Additional damage to targets with less than 40% HP. Extra damage when attacking targets with higher HP. Increased damage from his default skill, leading down to War Master. Also decided to pick up the additional accuracy here, because of course you saw my accuracy was below 200, so I did decide to, in some cases I would get this life drinker here, which is like a mini version of lifesteal, but he's already using a lifesteal set, so I decided to just pick up a little bit of extra accuracy here, because that's kind of one of the things that I'm lacking a little bit of. So that's a little bit there. That's a little bit when he's got no skills on cooldown. Let's see, 30% chance of increasing the turn meter by 10% with a debuff. Yes, he is debuff based, so you want to think about getting these for his debuffs, but keep in mind, of course, if you're using any speed tunes type team, then you want to be careful with stuff like this. Pretty much always take up Lore of Steel for extra stats from those basic sets. Cycle of Magic is pretty much for his skills on cooldown, 5% chance of reducing them by 1. And then, of course, this is for his skill 1 here, because it's not even close to 100% chance to place that debuff, so this helps out a little bit with that. And you've got the extend duration for debuffs, Master Hexer. So, maybe some little changes you can make here and there, but it's definitely pretty straightforward for like a dungeon-type team. Alright, now let's go ahead and head into a dungeon here. Let's just do a run-through of Dragon. And just so you can get a little understanding of how this guy works in a team, how much damage he's going to do, what kind of role he's actually performing. And I'll also just do a run through of the campaign as well, even though this is not really like a campaign farmer, not a champion you'd use for that, just so you can get a little bit of a better focus on him as individual champion without actually like looking at him with a whole bunch of other champions. So you can see we've got that decreased defense debuff up on all of those enemies right there. That was from Tayrel. And he does a decent chunk of damage. You can see the decreased attack there, which is always going to be activating because it is on his skill 1. So anytime he's got his other skills on cooldown, he's going to default to replacing that decreased attack debuff. And we'll take a look and see on the actual dragon, the abilities that he uses, the debuffs that he places. I see a stun there as well. That came from Tayrel, of course. So he's got that sleep and that stun, which is really nice for, you know, some additional survivability and utility on trash waves and things like that. Obviously not really going to do anything on the boss itself. But, you know, it's just this guy is very well-rounded. Like, you could use this champion, you can use Tayrel in pretty much any team, no problem. He's just super versatile, very strong. You know, he's not... I don't think he's the best at any one particular thing, but he's just very, very well-rounded and balanced. Alright, now we are on the boss here. We got that decreased defense. That was his AoE ability. You could see him kind of pound the weapon there. Obviously, on the dragon itself, we're only facing one enemy, but still going to place that decreased defense there. And now we've got that decreased attack, which also benefited from the masteries because we've got that 3-turn duration on it. And of course, if you're paying attention to the actual exact turn meters, you can kind of get a sense of what I was talking about with the debuffs and the fact that, you know, you are taking way more turns relative to the amount of turns that the dragon is taking. So he's got a lot of chances to place those debuffs, whereas the amount of turns that they're ticking down, it's not really, you know, it's not as important as, say, the buffs, for example, where the amount of turns that you have is much more important. You could see we've still got that decreased attack up there. And we'll just get a comparison of the actual damage here. You could see that he's definitely very, you know, in addition to having all of that, you know, those 2 strong debuffs, decreased attack, decreased defense, he's got that sleep, that stun, that decreased turn meter. He also puts out a very, very solid amount of damage right here, in addition to being a very survivable champion too. He's defense-based, so he's pretty tanky. So you can kind of get that understanding of, you know, what I was talking about with just being super well-rounded. Alright, and just to end things off here, I'll go ahead and take him in the campaign just with some food. This will only take a few seconds, so, you know, this is obviously not really, like, his specialty or anything, but just so you can get a better understanding of just him in a quick setting without other champions competing. Except the food champions, of course. I guess that's his competition, but they might actually just die here. Speaking of the food champions dying. And considering he's not a campaign farmer, you know, it's not too bad. He's still pretty much just one-shotting everything, but you can get some of his abilities here, and the, you know, the damage output, and his lifesteal gear, of course, is just awesome in a setting like that. Alright, anyway, that is going to be it for the video today. I hope that you guys enjoyed this overview of Tayrel, and of course, if you did and you want more videos like this in the future, consider subscribing to the channel. Feel free to leave a quick like as well. It means more than you can imagine. More videos should be popping up. Thanks again, everyone. This is Salt of the Salty Guild, signing out.